Hello.
And welcome to
Mind Body Stuff. I'm Kaylee.
I'm Bernice.
Okay, I am so excited for this podcast episode. I have been counting down the days. We are so excited to welcome Whitney Fishburn, who is an astrologist, to our podcast today. We've talked about her in previous podcasts. Whitney, I don't know if you knew that, but all good things.
I did not know.
So our audience has already gotten a little bit of information about you and about the readings that you have had with both myself and Bernice.
Yes.
And so we're just so excited to have you on. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, we're so excited. And since we mentioned you initially a few weeks ago, people have been like, when are you going to have Whitney on? So it's like, oh, people, here's Whitney. Here she is.
Oh my goodness. Well, hi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I have listened to the podcast. I just didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't listen to the ones where you mentioned me. But so here I am.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like my time with you just really gave some clarity to my life and gave me a lot of peace with different things. And so, as you know, I then told everyone I know about you. And so I'm just really excited. I know we're both really excited to dive into this conversation with you.
And learn more about you and what you do and inform the world.
Yeah, I should have sent you guys my chart. I don't know. A lot of astrologers actually don't like to share their chart, but I was just thinking I'm in the opposite seat this time. You guys are talking to me and asking me stuff and pulling stuff out of me.
Exactly.
But I'm game. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and your story? And I don't totally know your complete story, but I'm really interested to learn about how your history, especially work, brought you to this place that you're at now.
To astrology.
Yes. Well, I am just as surprised that I'm here as perhaps anybody could be when they find themselves in a career where they didn't go train for it necessarily, or they didn't start off doing that. But in the end, I think it all does make sense. But I'll tell you, I can give you the long and winding road version if that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Well, I would say this all began in 1984. I just didn't know it at the time. So 1984, around the time I was in high school in New England, and I wasn't a New Englander by birth. I had actually moved there from the South, and I was babysitting for another transplanted family from California. And, this was the 80s. This is pre the internet and everything. And there were a lot of things that you couldn't find out unless, it was either by accident or you just stumbled across people who knew things and were willing to tell you. But I came across this book while I was babysitting for these kind of crunchy hippie people. And it was on, they had The Joy of Sex. And I was still, whatever, I was like 16 or 17. I was a little too freaked out by that still. but today, who knows what, a young woman who came across that would feel like. But that was okay. So that gives you an idea of the kind of bookshelf they had. But then I found this other book that they had on therapeutic massage, and I pulled that down, and I was a little less weirded out by that. But I kept looking at the pictures and then reading, what the philosophy was, and it was just this idea that mind and body couldn't be separated. And I remember just being so staggered by this is true. So that really was when I began looking for more information about what I didn't get elsewhere, what I didn't get in my sex ed class or what I didn't get from my parents or whatever. And after I finished college, I majored in, ended up majoring in English, but that was because I had transferred for a variety of reasons. But I had started off as a Native American studies major. I had been, interested in American studies, and I studied specifically Western Plains tribes and that sort of thing. Mm. So I knew a lot about the history of these indigenous cultures that were much more about, the world is ensouled. The world is a place where everything is connected, and you would no sooner shoot a buffalo or kill a buffalo you didn't need to eat than you would chew off your own arm. That just didn't make any sense. Right. So I was already kind of seeing myself go in the directions toward what I thought was just made sense. Right. And at the time, though, I still was looking for more information about the mind-body connection. Anyway, in college, I met my first tarot reader, and she read for me, and I'll never forget, just like the whole reading was all major arcana, and just, she was so freaked out. She's like, this never happens. And I was like, wow, does that mean I'm special? What does this mean? It just meant I had a whole load of stuff I had to work through, is what I look back now and realize there was a lot I was going to have to go through, a lot on my plate. And then, after I left college, I had already, by then I'd had a nervous breakdown. I had dropped out of school for a while. I'd put myself into a institution for people with eating disorders. I had been bulimic and anorexic throughout high school and college. And then that really got me interested in the more Western therapeutic approach to things, because I left the institution where I was and I said, those people are stone cold freaking crazy. And I am never going to go back to something like that again. I am way more together than any of the people that were treating me were. So that was also an eye opener. And I realized, okay, it's down to me. I'm going to have to figure out all this stuff. So whatever that, that was still, I'm still in the 1980s here. So, and then really just little by little by little by little, I was learning all kinds of things. I've done hundreds of hours of yoga, and I continued to study the tarot. I worked with various astrologers. I lived in New Orleans for a while, and I studied capoeira. I have always studied some form of martial art. So I had done karate, and I was in New Orleans studying karate with this kind of capoeira, which is a lot more of the kicking and the gymnastic kind of thing. I was terrible at it. I really wasn't that good at it. But the teacher that I had was also a voodoo priest. So, okay, so tell me what you know about that. So it was like anytime I had an opportunity to learn about what was up until only recently called the occult, I took that opportunity. And and all of this, it always called to me, the other. And at one point I even said, okay, I think what I need to do is be a nun. So I'd also looked at understanding whether or not I was being called, or if it was just more of a fascination with the pageantry of the church and so forth. Ultimately, I decided, no, there was no particular form of study that could encapsulate what I was looking for. I wasn't that sort of disciplined student, but I was gathering so much information, and things were starting to make sense to me. And that is really when I started to look at the world the way that the indigenous peoples do, which is it's all connected. It's an ensouled place. And every place that I go that has its fixation on the higher mind tells you that. We're all going home because we're already there. It's more of a question of just becoming aware of what's already inside of us, and then reflecting that back to us through what we have around us, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah.
So ultimately, but here's the real trick to all of this, though, is I kept all of this to myself. I actually never shared that this is what I was doing, except for my husband at the time, and we're still friends with each other. And we were together for this reason. He was also a seeker in this way. He's much more open about it than I was at the time. But what I did do was I pursued an actual career in healthcare. And I was at first I wrote about healthcare. I was a freelance journalist, and I wrote about things that interested me, but I didn't espouse them. So I wrote about Rolfing, and I wrote about cranial sacral technique. And this was all back in the 80s when it was still kind of on the vanguard. And eventually I worked within hospital systems, and I wrote marketing materials both for internal marketing and for external marketing purposes. I learned about the industrialization of medicine firsthand. I was in one of the very first hospitals to use the Six Sigma technique, which is basically car manufacturing techniques for what they called patient throughput. So that was a really bizarre way for me to, here I was in my personal life, really dedicating myself to understanding how we walk in peace and harmony with what is, but not seen unless you see it through what is. And meanwhile, I'm writing and I'm helping executives write about how people are essentially like widgets. But I have to tell you, I really love healthcare. I really love the systems that we have put in place. And I've really enjoyed my career, my public facing career as first a marketing person. And then ultimately, I became a journalist, and I covered clinical medicine, and I was an editor for a psychiatry journal, and I was an editor for an infectious disease journal. And I had some amazing mentors who are, solid, hardcore scientist, medical people. And I love them. They've taught me so much. And even though I had biology in college, I didn't really come up studying the scientific method and having to apply it as a student. I learned it, and I respect it, and I use it. And I will forever be grateful to the people who were patient in teaching me the things I didn't know and that I learned as a part of the healthcare system. And then that eventually made me in demand here in Washington when a lot of things were happening in the merger market space around healthcare. And so my background covering things like the FDA and Medicare and Medicaid, and then clinical medicine led to me becoming a healthcare economics and antitrust reporter. And I loved that. I love that because it's, what I didn't realize is it was really setting me up to understand astrology, because it's all about cycles and it's all about systems. Mm-hmm. And I just, it all kind of came together really in the last 2 years, because COVID allowed me. I was also doing something else that I love while I was being a reporter, and I was reviewing classical music here. And I live in Washington, D.C., and Washington is an incredibly, incredibly fantastic town for cultural and intellectual pursuits. I love it here. And I was a classical music reviewer, and my special area of expertise is opera. But when COVID hit, nothing was happening in the concert space. So I said, I've been studying astrology now but at that point I've been studying astrology almost exclusively. Everything else kind of undergirding my approach to learning astrology. But I had been studying astrology exclusively for about, 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I was starting to feel like I could do this. I don't know, but it's Washington. Nobody's going to take me seriously, but I really don't know what I would do if I didn't do this anymore. I love this so much, and I'm getting so much out of it. So I stopped doing it. Well, thank you. And I feel like I'm talking forever here, so I'll wrap this up. But I stopped everything I was doing because COVID gave me that opportunity, because I didn't have to review concerts anymore. And I got a job pruning roses and pruning shrubs, which is something I had also always wanted to do, just to have a reason to be outside and to work with beautiful nature, beautiful gardens. And while I was apprenticing and eventually, being considered a professional hand pruner here in Washington, and I've done some people you would definitely know and recognize on the news. I've done their gardens. It's like only in Washington, right? Only in DC. While I was the only one in my household outside during the lockdown, I was actually working with plants, and, it just gave me all of this time to think about what I was doing and whether or not I really could just go out and, no joke intended, but go out on a limb and just, and go for it. And so I did. And I really love it. It brings everything together, and I'm old enough now, in my mid 50s. I can say to somebody, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. And, does this resonate with you? Does it? Okay, good. Let's go down this path. Let's work on this together. And I'm definitely seeing things through the lens of astrology, but I'm also seeing things through the lens of, two serious, hard depressions that at one point I wasn't sure I was going to make it through twice. I've been to that edge, and it wasn't the world of medicine that I love so much that saved me. Really, it wasn't. It was me and my dedication to the truth and being convinced that if I just hung on another day and I asked another question, I'd get there.
Wow.
Yeah. So, there are many cracks I could fill in there, but that's a pretty robust compendium of experiences that, led me to here.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like to hear the progression. I love how you love, it sounds like you're just a really curious person. And I think of Kaylee, because Kaylee's very curious too sometimes. Like sometimes I'm like, stop being curious. It's just how it is.
The why is the why.
Yeah. Don't be curious. But like how your curiosity just led you down all these paths. And then eventually, because of COVID, you have this freedom. This freedom frees you up in a weird way to be like, but what is my passion essentially?
Yes, I think you're right, Bernice. I think that's really, I'm pretty low key about it because so many people have experienced 2020 as a heartbreaking year. And I had my share of things that I'm sad about, but no, for me, 2020 was a gateway. It was definitely a gateway into really being able to turn around and see the past as the past. And that's where it belongs.
Wow.
I love that.
So for our listeners out there who have never had an astrology reading or don't even know that much, can you just explain a little bit about let's say someone goes to your site and books a reading with you, like what can they expect? Because I think this is really important because I feel like there's a little bit of like a fear around it for people who don't understand it. And so, yeah, like what can you, like, how does this process work essentially?
Oh, so the process, when you say process, you mean with me? How does getting in touch with me and working with me work?
I mean, like, what can somebody expect? Because I have so many people that like before a reading or whatever, they'll be like, I'm so nervous. And it's like, what is that? Like, what is that people do you find are nervous about or not understanding about? I just want everybody who listens to this podcast, honestly, to find you and book a session with you. Like, I've told you this. It was totally life-changing for me, and I want people to find you. So maybe a little bit about if somebody books a session with you, like, yeah, what can they expect? And then we can talk about our experience too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, thank you. My goodness. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your enthusiasm for what I'm doing. So thank you, Kaylee and Bernice. Well, now I have a website because at first I was just doing it all word of mouth, and I found that the referrals, thank you, Missoula, Montana, and Kaylee, I found that I just kept getting booked, and I've had to cut back my hours pruning, which is kind of a bummer because I love working with the roses in particular, and the winter is when you shape the roses. But hey, I put the site together because it seemed to be the right time. And so the first thing you would do, and I'm going to get to the bigger question of why do people get nervous, but the first thing you would do is to find me online, because you can do that now. And the name of my I call it a consulting practice. Because I see it as just as important to self-care as an annual checkup. I don't see this as like gossamer wings and pixie dust and woo-woo. And I'm not disparaging that. Some people, that's their approach to it. That's just not my personality. I'm not I don't talk to the angels and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think they're there, but that's just not the way I'm going to approach a session with a person. So Ensouled, ENSOULED, ensouledastrology.com. So why would people be nervous? And, first of all, there are so many different levels of experience with astrology that people have or don't have. And actually, when you go to my website, you're asked to fill out a form first. And you guys know from working with me that I ask you to fill out a questionnaire beforehand. And that is a way to introduce, it's kind of a slow roll introduction to each other, where you see the kinds of things that I'm going to be interested in and what I might be able to help you zone in on and find some clarity with. But it also tells me, where are you coming from? What are some of the basics of your life experience that help me to fill in the blanks that, because the chart's going to tell me a lot, but it's not going to tell me everything. It's just going to give me kind of like handles to grab hold of, as I'm scaling the rock in a way, so that's the first thing, is just, and you don't have to answer all the questions. I just need basic information. I need your birth date and place and time and whatever your specific concern might be, or maybe you don't have a specific concern, in which case that's information for me to know too. Yeah. But I think, once that groundwork is laid, it can do one of two things. Either the person gets excited, like, oh, see, I have these things. I've taken them out of my head now. I'm putting them down on paper. I'm looking at them. These are the things I really am thinking about and that I want some answers on. And then that gets people excited. Or people go, I'm going to have to face this.
Yes.
And then what? And that, I'm very sensitive to that because, yes, I am curious. Yes, Kaylee, you might be curious. Not everyone is fearless. That's not a judgment. That's just, not everyone's constitution has them set up such that they're okay with flying without a net. And, maybe because they have more fixed energy, their energies are going to be more Leo, more Aquarius, more Scorpio, but, maybe they've got a mix of that with the cardinal energy, which would be Capricorn, Cancer, Aries. That's sort of like, I'm going to go for it. Woo. And then it's like, oh, I kind of lost interest, but I did that thing and I got it going and somebody else is doing it now. So, or in Libra's another cardinal energy. And then there's the mutable where the person feels like, yeah, I'll do that. I'm not sure. Okay, well, yeah, so like that, getting that focus on the questionnaire, it starts to, orient myself and you toward what we're going to do, and where we're going to go with that. But that fear can come up when you realize that you're going to learn something that might change your orientation to yourself and to your environment. And that could be a relief, or it could be a crisis. And sometimes crises can be good, and sometimes you're going to get information and you're going to say, I thought that was true. And now that means I really am aware of the fact that this desire I've had all my life to become an entrepreneur and to quit my job doing whatever, let's say teaching. And then, now I want to go and start a bakery, that's in me. I knew that was right. But then you're faced with, well, what do I do with that information? How am I going to act on that? And that's the kind of stuff is that can be frightening to people. And I think our subconscious kind of leads ahead of us. And it starts to, like those spider senses feels like this is going to give me something I'm going to have to do something with.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wonder if it has something to do with people being afraid to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Because with astrology, you have access to information that a lot of us don't know how to tap into. And so, we can put on a front as humans, we can act a certain way, we can present a persona, but I think it can be a little bit scary to meet with someone who we feel like can see what we don't always show other people.
I think that's an excellent insight, actually, Kaylee, because the follow-on to that is, and then be judged. People are afraid of being judged.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And I'm very sensitive to that. I'll own this. I think I've said this to, if not the two of you, then recently I've said it in readings. I live with that myself. I have Leo rising, and a whole bunch of other things in my chart that, I know as an astrologer indicate that I'm extremely sensitive to what the people around me and the world at large think of me. And it's taken me, again, I think this is a better time in my life to do this because I'm older, and it's taken me a while to understand that, that's just me. And I have a little way of talking myself down from the, oh my God, and just be like, oh yeah, that's just me doing this thing. And then, these other things about you that mean that you're just going to get involved in what you're doing. And soon you're going to not even care what people think because you're going to be doing what you do. And, and when you have a sensitivity to that though, in other people, I think you can find ways to put them at ease. So if a person is afraid of being judged, you're only going to know from working with me that I'm not doing that to you, but it's an understandable an obstacle to going forward with, having a consultation with me or with anybody. It is definitely though.
You brought up something in my reading and you brought it up in a way that you were like, that you gave me acceptance about parts of myself that maybe I'm not super proud of. But when you showed me in my chart, this is like, it's in your chart that maybe you would have a tendency to do this. What it allowed me to do was to not feel shame about it, but to accept it, but not just say, well, that's just me. I can accept it, but with a more constructive perspective of it rather than be stuck in like a shame aspect of, oh, well, this is how I am. It's like, oh, this is not wrong that I'm this way. I didn't do something bad that I'm this way. I'm not messing up in this way. This is just part of my nature, part of who I am. And now I get to do with that piece of information what I want, but I'm not stuck in the shame about it since my reading with you. And I find it like, it's just so, I don't know, like there's so many words I would use to describe it, but my reading with you gave me acceptance of some of the parts of myself. And I never once felt like you were judging me. I think you're so good at the delivery too. And obviously you're so good with your words. I mean, just listening to your story and how you speak and how you can take concepts and deliver them in a way that I feel like just really get right to the soul of it. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. And you have a gift, because I'm always afraid of like, I grew up in Hawaii, so it's always like, something magical might happen, or I'm always like, will I be able to handle it? And it's calm down. It's like I have to think like, well, maybe someone pops out and it's like, oh, I have no control of that person. But you were wonderful because to go back to how you described yourself, your interest in cycles and systems, because essentially astrology is a study of cycles and systems.
Very much so. Yeah.
And so it's because in our Western world, maybe we have this idea of like, well, for some of us anyway, I won't speak for everybody, but maybe it's magical and you won't have control over it. Right. There's something sort of like, oh, what is that? But you presented it in such a way that you were like, and so I really love the questionnaire in the beginning too, because it's like, sometimes I've been to people and I'm like, well, what will you tell me? And then it's always like, usually it's something like kind of bad. Usually I get some bad readings, and I'm always like, yeah, I can do that. That would be fine. Thank you so much for that.
Well, can I respond to both of your extremely gratifying comments? Because, this isn't the end game for me. In fact, this is a means to an end. And I've been thinking a lot about it recently. Astrology gives me the opportunity to do what I was always searching for a way to do as a healthcare policy reporter, as an editor of a scholarly journal, as somebody who, in Washington, D.C., I don't lead with the fact that I've been studying astrology and doing astrology. This is not the town where you're going to be taken seriously doing that kind of thing. But I have always had a goal, and it has to do with systems. And I've come to realize through my writing, I have another publication that I started and I'm the publisher of. It's called Docu-Mental, Mapping the American States of Mind. And I started that about 3 years ago, and it's doing really well. But I started it as a way to analyze policy and public health and why those things are so related to our skyrocketing levels of anxiety and depression and also suicide. Mm-hmm. And I started to realize, it's because our system is broken. And I care so much about systems. And astrology in this backdoor way is actually allowing me to radicalize people, because both of you stated what I think is essential if democracy is going to work and if our systems built upon democracy are going to work. And that is people aware of their own powers, limitations, desires, dreams, and their ability to have not just a connection to their future and thus hope, but the power and the feeling and confidence to act upon that hope. So you both just showed me that, when I work with people, that's possible. And when people such as yourselves are multiplying around the country, or, I have some clients also now in Australia and in Scotland, when more people like that are aware of the brokenness in which they're trying to function, then they can turn around and say, I'm not the broken one. It's the system that's broken. And I know who I am. So I know what I can do about this. And little by little, we're going to be able to fix things. I don't know what it'll look like, but I know it starts at the individual level. And I just know that. I've studied systems, I've studied policy, and it doesn't come from the top down.
Mm-mm.
Oh, totally.
It has to come from the bottom up.
And I mean, maybe this is off topic, but I was having a conversation with some friends the other night, and, our government, our local government in Montana just shifted totally conservative. And, it's just this like back and forth and back and forth. And I, part of it to me, I was like, well, like things have to change on the individual level, because I feel like when they just change on that high level, it's just like it's not sustaining or long lasting. It's like, so whoever's is in power at that time, things may change here and there, but it's like the real work, I believe, needs to come from the inside out, from the individual to the masses, from the bottom to the top. And I do think, Whitney, it has a lot to do with self examination, self-acceptance, self-love,
self-awareness,
trusting that we have power to make change. And I totally agree with you. This stuff is so exciting for me. I always envision what the world would look like if individuals had the ability to heal themselves, to look at themselves, to feel the power to actually make change in their own lives, and what that would do to the world as a whole. And that stuff gets me so excited. And just talking with you, it's a huge piece. I think it's very, very cool to think of a future that is more, that's more open to this type of a way to explore ourselves in the world we live in.
It's one of the things I came across while I was writing the first 2 years of Documental was this understanding. It just kept dawning on me and growing and growing. And just like in astrology, where I would never tell you that Saturn is making you do this thing, because it's not, the stars don't make you do anything, but there are correlations. What I started to see were correlations between, really the last 50 years, but in particularly since the 1980s, with the rise of neoliberalism, this kind of, which is really just extra syllables around conservatism. The greater the level of deregulation, the greater the level of what is called, I'll get economical for a second here, but consumer welfare, which is just, it sounds like great, it's serving my interests. No, it doesn't really serve your interests, but consumer welfare was in the ascendant in the 80s, and that was essentially giving business and corporations more and more power, and saying that it was giving you more buying power because your consumer welfare is your dollar is going to go further. But that was always at the expense of your rights as a citizen. So as I saw these parallels rising in it was 3 parallels really, our levels of pain. So like anxiety, depression, just pain. And then but mental pain, not physical pain. Actually, this is an interesting fact. Physical pain, outside of the pain of being in, pain associated with cancer, physical pain is pretty much always the same. When you do studies, the physical pain doesn't change. So that's interesting if you're looking at the opioid epidemic, because that was pushed on us as a nation because we were told we were in pain, but we were in pain, just not physical pain. It was mental pain. And as the corporate power grew and monopolies grew, and you started to see everything merging all over the place, every sector became monolithic. And every time that happened, our freedom of choice in the marketplace would go down on a lot of things. I mean, there's also technology that's also changing, and that's also in the background, so it's not everything, but what we're used to and what we need, just look at how everything has become like a mega everything. Like Amazon is mega and Google is mega and Home Depots are mega. Just like everything became much more about the big store, not the small mom and pop stuff. Well, that impacted the quality of life because that meant less jobs with, less people actually looking out for their employees and make sure they had a livable wage, and less opportunity to move around. In my own industry, there are less jobs for me as a clinical medicine writer because all of the different mastheads I used to work for, they've merged. If I don't write for one, then I can't write for the rest of them either because they're all in-house now. And when they bring them in-house, then they recycle content. And so there are less need for writers. And this is happening across all of the industries. That leaves people anxious and depressed and scared and worried. And I saw that parallel. And the more that those things were happening, the less empowered people felt. And they're starting to wake up and realize, wait a minute, I gave away all my power while I was a consumer with welfare in my behalf. You can buy more things cheaper as everything went off to China and it was made cheaper. But my rights as a citizen were stripped of me. I don't really have power now. And I think as people wake up and see, wait a minute, I've been outsourced. I'm a widget in the healthcare system. I'm just a cog in a workaday situation where I have all kinds of responsibility and no authority. And, that's depressing. People feel hemmed in. We've all kind of become enslaved to the system. And then you add the layer of surveillance capitalism where everything that we are, all of our data, all of our personal information is being bought and sold and traded without our knowledge. The scandals around Facebook and Google, all of that we are the product. And I think people are starting to wake up and realize I've been sold by my institutions that are supposed to support me. And now I'm trapped. What do I do? And I think that is actually, to Kaylee's point about, you have all of this conservative power now moving in. It's both. It's bidirectional. It comes from the ground up. But if we're not aware of how we're giving that power upwards, then they get it and then they don't want to give it back. And then they hold it over us. And that's the kind of cycle that the more we become aware of, the less we can let it perpetuate itself. It's complex, but it's happening.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I have a few friends who have small businesses, and they're like, but they're convinced because of the dynamics that have been occurring over these last few decades that it's much safer to not work for your own business. You want to work for a big business. And I'm like, really? But you're going to lose all control.
Exactly.
Well, I don't want to work as much and I want to have this, I want to have a set pension plan or whatever it is. I'm like, yeah, but right now you are the queen of your ship. You're in charge.
I think what you are doing with ULA is the new vanguard. I'm seeing this in other places too. This idea where you create the community and you support the community, you pay into the community, but you're there for each other. And you can leave the community. Nobody holds a gun to your hands and now you're one of us. It's not like you're true believers or it's not culty. It takes the best of groups, systems, and dynamics and says, I'm here for you, but you're going to have to contribute. And, I'm going to celebrate what you are and who you are, but this is our standard. And I don't know, I don't participate, but I see what you guys are doing and I see it in other places and I'm so excited. And I think, we're scared right now, right? Because we saw the insurrection and we see, 4 years of what we just endured. He's a private citizen now, but he's still there, and all of the darkness around him. But I don't know. I take it seriously. I take it seriously. But really, then I look at ULA, and then I look at other things that I see like that all around the world. And I think I see it as their last hurrah, because their only superpower is inhumanity. And the looking backward that they're insisting on means that, have they ever offered us a vision of progress? Do they even have a vision? No. And if you're not going forward and you are going backward, but everyone else really wants to go forward, your voter suppression, your insistence on, the sameness, it eventually has to collapse. It might hurt while it does, but I just don't see them sustaining. I don't see this darkness sustaining, and this incessant insistence on whatever it was in the past that they think made them special, or the people who ascribe to that. I think that the community that you build at ULA is the type of thing we're moving toward. And I know astrologically, I could talk mundane astrology, that is supporting what's happening. We have a lot of cycles astrologically that say, things could get really scary and there's no guarantee, but the alignments are pointing the way toward greater collaboration, greater innovation, and much more humanitarian focus, much more humanitarian values.
Well, and that is such an interesting thing to talk about, because just the events of the past. Oh God. I mean, what? Yeah. I mean, the past, I guess, year, when things feel so big. And so Whitney and I talked, was it like 2 days after the insurrection? It was like right after. And you were saying you could just look out your window and just see all of the shitstorm that was going on.
Well, it wasn't like I could look out the window and see people raiding the city, but yeah. And I definitely saw the people coming in and out of the city. And yeah, I mean, you were aware that things were happening.
Yeah. And so that situation, like I was on vacation, so I was trying to be in vacation mode. So I was like following it. But then when I finally tapped into what was really happening, it's just kind of like unbelievable. It just felt like totally unbelievable. And what I did is I actually like tried to figure out what all of you astrologers were saying about the times. Like, I'm like, what are they saying? Is this what's, I don't want to use the word supposed to be happening, because I know you say it's not that what the astrology, it's like making something happen, but it helps kind of explain what's happening. And it sounds like this is like part of the shifts that all the craziness that has been happening recently, like it is part of a process towards a more humanitarian time. And, with Aquarius and the water bearer, that the humanitarian side is going to start to take a little bit more of the lead. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, that is there. And the more people who wake up and are aware of their available connection to a future will, the more people say, wait, this is a choice and I can make it. And I will look for ways to make it bigger and realer and deeper, more real and deeper, every day. And that's why I love that, like I said, every consultation I do with someone is a radicalization of them to their own power. And not like power to the people, go out there and protest. Like, you could do that. I'm not telling you not to, but it's more like, oh, wait, I'm this, and this is what I am, and not that, and not that. So knowing this, I can do these things. And that's extremely empowering. And that's all I'm saying, is that being outsourced, as we have been for the last 40, 50 years, we are the product and the consumer at the same time. That strips us of our power. And now the stars have lined up and said, well, that's not the only choice you have. You can do these other things. And we are pointing the way if you choose to follow it. It's there. And it's it's a paradox. I think about this all the time. I drive my own astrology professors and teachers and stuff because I still, I'm a student. I'm still, even though I've been doing this, like 5 years now. You add that to all the other experiences that I've had, and I bring a whole bunch of different lenses of questions. And I ask my astrology professors all the time. I actually just graduated from a school based in the UK, and I would always wrap class around my finger at the end and say, okay, so is this choice or is this fate? We would always have to have this conversation, and I don't have a hard and fast answer. I think that really the best way for me to make sense of it is exactly why I call my consulting practice Ensouled Astrology. It's because we are part of a process. We're sometimes more conscious of that process. We're sometimes totally oblivious to the process. But there is a deeper, wider, more vast, more intelligent psyche in the cosmos. And we get to wake up and participate if we choose. If not, we're going to get woven into something anyway. And that's the mystery, is how much power do we want to take responsibility for, and how do we apply it? And I just always think if I'm not hurting anybody intentionally, sometimes you do things and it does hurt somebody. You don't mean for that to happen. Well, that's your opportunity to take responsibility for the impact you had. But if I'm not intentionally hurting anyone and I'm actually finding ways to help people find what they need so that they can move forward, then that's my way of engaging with the larger universe. And I find that really exciting. And time is speeding up. So there's no time to waste anymore. We have more things coming at us every minute than in any other time in our recorded human history that we're aware of anyway. And so I don't want to I don't want to wait around and suddenly wake up one day and go, well, I'm so behind everybody else and I could have done more and I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you bring up a good point in terms of like how for our listeners to think about your practice, it is a radicalization of your own power. Mm-hmm. So in other words, it's finding the directional aspect of your powers and kind of having someone say, these are the directions you have opportunity to move into, whatever they may be. So then you get to choose, do you want to move into those directions or not? It's sort of empowering people. I think that's what we do, like you're saying, Whitney, with ULA as well. The empowerment of these individuals to find their own strengths and their own ability to make their choices.
Yeah. And you just made me think of something, Bernice. One of the things, so let me talk a little bit astrology here. It depends on who my professor is or who my teacher is for the time. I have some modern astrology teachers who say, never use the jargon. Just don't, because it confuses people and they forget it. And then they get confused and then they don't even remember what you were trying to tell them in plain English. But I also think it's important and I'm a process person as it is. I'm very process driven. So let me tell you how I got to this place so that you know that I didn't just rip this out of my, a-hole. I applied a logic to this. There is a system for how I get to where I get to. But, what we've just experienced as a world, was what's called the Great Mutation. Okay. So it sounds scary and awful, like, genetic mutation or something like that. But in a sense it was, but it's beautiful and it's exciting because what happened was on the winter solstice. So back in December, you might have heard about this, right? The Great Conjunction, Jupiter and Saturn, we call them the Great Chronicators because they are the largest and furthest planets in our solar system that we can see with the naked eye. Now, obviously there are planets beyond there, but those are the ones we can see. And so we can look at them and follow them in the sky. And they take the longest amount of time of those that are visible to travel around the sun. So you think of them as kind of recording eras. It's a generation. Saturn goes around the sun in just under 30 years. So that's essentially an entire generation. Mm-hmm. So you had these two chronicators lined up at the same time on the same degree in Aquarius on the winter solstice at the time of something called the Great Mutation. It's the changing of when those two line up, moving from happening in earth signs to moving into air signs. So we went from a very earthy 800 years of 20-year cycles. There were a couple that were different, but for the most part, these 800 years of 20-year cycles in Earth. So the focus was on being sustainable and being, fed and money and, building things and the Industrial Revolution and just like tangible stuff, what you can hold, what you can do, and then, just like practical, which is great. I'm very much about that. That's a large part of my own, my own signature. But what we've done now is we've moved into 800 years or around that time, a large number of centuries focused on the air. And what happens in the air? Well, communication happens in the air, and it's not about how much you hold on to and grab and possess 99.1, 99 to the 1%. That's going to change. That paradigm is not there and going to be sustained anymore. What's going to happen? I don't know, but it's going to change. The emphasis, the support universally, cosmically, terrestrially, the support is now for things that are all about ideas and communication and, feeling it in the wind, sort of like intuition and moving things forward quickly before you even know it's there. You didn't even see it. Boom, it's there because it can move fast on the wind. It's so exciting, right? We don't know where that's going to go, but it's not going to be what was. It's just not.
Wow. Yeah. That's exciting. It is. It's really exciting. I have a question about, going back to what you mentioned about fate versus free will a little bit. And so is there any way that someone can just get off course for their life? And can you see that in your chart? Or do you ever have situations where you're and this and this, and it's just not lining up? Can people get off their course? Or is it just I'm just so curious about that relationship of what you see in a chart and how people are living and, how much that correlation.
I love this question actually, because this gets into my fascination with whether or not astrology is in a reformation period. And I would say actually that it is. Anything that's dynamic should always be undergoing some kind of change. But astrology right now is really finding itself at a crossroads. And the reason for that is because, I don't know, I guess the last 40 years, which is interesting, it's been about the same amount of time that we've been seeing our economic cycle change and help us feel trapped. There's been this great awakening of sorts where ancient texts around astrology have been either discovered and translated, or, it's happening at a very scholarly level. There are universities where you can actually go and you can study these astrological texts seriously. And that has awakened a large movement toward the traditional ways of using astrology, which are much more fatalistic, I think. Mm-hmm. And then you have the modern astrology, which I would say maybe goes back to the Theosophists of the late 1800s, 1880s, and so forth, and all the way up until around maybe 1980, 1990, when all of this traditional stuff started to come to the fore. And that is much more kind of it's all about your soul and the archetypes and reincarnation and this real hodgepodge. And it sort of just started to become a mishmash of things that didn't have a clear lineage and wasn't tested over time, but found its way into psychology. And, it was kind of like a free for all. And so what does an astrologer who wants to help somebody do with all of this information? Some of it is organized, some of it is not. Some of it is people saying, well, I channeled this. And there are people who do that. I channeled this astrology information, and wow, sometimes that information is really interesting. And sometimes I just think, well, you could have just had a spastic colon and decided that this sounded fun, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't want to base my reputation and my opportunity to work with somebody on something that turns out to be just bananas, so
Past a colon.
Good.
so when I look at somebody's chart, it's very, very neutral. It's a neutral statement. It's just, these are the energies, these are the things that present themselves as possibilities in your past that I can look to, or these are the possibilities in the future that you might be headed toward. But it's all here. It's this circle, right? And our lives are spiral. They spiral up, they spiral down. I don't think we live linearly. We find ourselves, like Eliot, the poet, said, we find ourselves at the beginning, all over again, but different, right? Mm-hmm. So when I'm looking at a person's chart, if I get the sense that they aren't living to their full potential or living to the map that they have, mm-hmm. I find the answer in the chart. There are times when a transit can kick off something, a transit being when, so let me back up. So a natal chart is the kind of like, I think of it as the functional magnetic resonance image. So an fMRI, right? You can have your brain imaged, mm-hmm. and so you can have your the moment of your birth. It's an image of that, right? It's an energy map of the moment of your birth, just like you can map the energy patterns in your brain at any moment when you think a certain thing. And they do that all the time now, right. With, meditation. Like when you meditate on love, this is what your brain looks like. When you meditate on hurting somebody, this is what your brain looks like. And so when you're born, the energy is aligned a certain way. And that's the resonance you carry within yourself all the time, whether or not you're aware of it. And when the transits, because, you're born, then the world doesn't stop. I mean, that's just an image of a moment. It's not, that's it. That's the universe. So as the planets are going about their business, they are resonances, they are frequencies, and they are communicating with the ones that are set within each of us. And sometimes they don't get out of alignment. They get louder in some cases, they get softer in some cases. And if you're not attuned to what's happening, you can get overwhelmed. I was just working with somebody recently who is undergoing a really tough transit. Now remember, I'm telling you, the planets are not making you do anything. They're indicating that you are resonating a certain way at a certain time. And so the more awareness you have about what that frequency is and what those resonances are and the potentials within them, the easier it is for you to cope with it. And if you do nothing with it, at least know it's a cycle. It will end. It will come to an end. But the more awareness you have of all of the storms that can happen or the peaceful times that can happen, then the more you can say, oh, wait, this is just me being me, and I don't have to get upset about that. Or I might be in pain right now, but I know it's going to come to an end, and then I'll look back and I'll be able to say, and these were the things I got out of that, and I can integrate those now. And usually what happens is after a painful transit comes along another transit that gives you the opportunity to integrate. I mean, the cycles work together. They indicate, honestly, if we didn't have astrology, we would probably, because we're ingenious creatures, we would figure out a way to map these cycles that are happening anyway, right? Because that's how we grow. And that's how we move forward, is you have to break apart, integrate, break apart, integrate, break apart, integrate. I mean, that's just the life cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
That's such a good point.
That is a really good point. And after I had my reading with you, I knew that you would be like the perfect person for Bernice to talk to, because it's like, I mean, even on your website, you have this written. It says astrology works. The charts don't lie. The key is knowing how to interpret the data. And I love that because, like B mentioned earlier, she's always like, yeah, well, where exactly what? Did you pull it out of your ass? I don't know where you got. And I thought you were the perfect person for her to talk to, because it's a science, it's a science that's been around for thousands and thousands of years. And so, and even before you told me something, Whitney, you're like, I checked this like 3 different ways before I brought it to you, and it's just like, it's really, I think it's so beautiful, the intersection of spirit and science that happens with astrology. Like, it's really fascinating.
Oh, and your reading was so helpful to me. I just went home for a visit, my first visit in over a year. And I'll make this more personal for the listeners. If you're considering doing a reading, Whitney, you helped me because I had to interact with both my sisters, and which I love them. They're very nice people, but they're both very well educated. Both are PhDs. Both are very different than me, very quiet and reserved and kind of thoughtful. And all, I had to go by myself. So I was all worried, like, oh, it's me again, alone, the loud, passionate person with feelings. But Whitney had said in my chart, it just says, that part of your gift isn't in intellectual, it isn't in gaining how many PhDs I have, because I always feel less than because of that. Mm-hmm. And so this time I'm like, I'm okay. I'm just who I am. Mm-hmm. Like, I have my own gifts. They're not maybe the PhD gifts, and that's like totally fine. And I handle it way, way better. Way better.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah. I was okay.
I think that's part of what Kaylee, you were asking is, what happens when people aren't living up to the promise of their chart. And, as I was saying, it's a question of developing self-awareness, but also being we've been talking about this. It's being willing to step outside of the status quo too. And the status quo, wherever it is, within a family, within a system, within a community, within a job, whatever, the status quo says, here's your role, and this is a role we're going to have you play. And this is your list of tasks in that role. And you're going to be judged according to how well you play that role and do those tasks. And then we just kind of go on autopilot. And the transits indicate those times when we have opportunities to say, hey, wait a minute. Did I choose these roles? Because this doesn't feel right. And I'm not even that good at this list of tasks. And I hate these tasks. What am I doing these for? Or we just say, I'm really unhappy and I don't know why. And we let the moment pass. So that is what I think is so, it can be very beautiful about a consultation. And that's actually why I call it a consultation instead of a reading, although I don't mind when people call them readings. But I think of this very much as it's a partnership. I work with the people that come to me, and I take the lead sometimes, but you take the lead sometimes. And it's about kind of designing the path out of the meeting that takes you further than where you were when you started talking to me, and that you cannot do that blindly. You have to become conscious of where you're going to go. And then, then the whole world just shifts and it's in what it offers you, because you're framing it differently.
Yeah, it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
That's really true.
And it's like, it's looking at it's a reframe. It's looking at a different frame. Maybe you've been fixated on one frame or two frames, like, this is how I frame my life. This has worked for me. Or maybe it's not working for me and I keep hitting these brick walls. It's like, okay, well, let's try a different frame. Mm-hmm. How about a different frame? Mm-hmm. Let's look at it through this lens.
Right. Well, and as you both know, obviously, like, I spend a lot of time in my head, and I always am like, thinking so much about these things and why am I this way? And just to hear someone be like, well, this is why, because you've got your moon in Taurus and you got this. And then it's like, I just like the amount of self-acceptance was like huge. And I think self-acceptance is like one of the first steps on your path to freedom, to power, to, all of these things that I think we want, but you first have to accept like who you are.
Yeah. But so it's like, right. Yeah. You're going to like keep beating yourself over the head
for not being like somebody else.
Yeah.
How many times do we all, like, at least me, I shouldn't speak for everyone, just like wish that I was a different way, or like, well, look at them. How are they able to do all this? And it's like, babe, that's not you. You're not supposed to be doing what they're doing.
Right.
It's okay you spend a bunch of time in your head. Like, this is part of your nature. Like, this is just who you are.
Yeah, good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So
I hope that sort of enthusiasm for self-forgiveness is something that all my clients find the way toward, because you do have to not know something before you know it. And, the amount of time you spend stuck in the lower resonance of your chart, where you're playing the game that the status quo can easily make you play, is information that you can use once you've been enlightened to say, I know what that's like. And I know how I feel when I'm in that position or when I'm in that resonance. And I also know I have these other things that are to my advantage and that I uniquely can do. So I'll do that. But you then can see things in relief. You have black and white, you have knowledge, you have ignorance. And so it's that, again, it's that breaking apart, integrating, breaking apart, integrating. But the way I see clients successfully navigate that process is the way I was just listening to the two of you talk about it as, self-acceptance, which involves forgiveness. And then when you can be that at peace with yourself, it's so much easier to be that way with other people. Not always, but it is easier. And that just makes for a better world and a better community and a better relationship.
For sure.
Yes, that's a very, very good point.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So before we wrap up, anything like knowing Bernice and my chart, do we work? What is there anything about our chart that's like, oh yeah, because if you think about it, we have a 21-year age difference. We're at, we're really different, but there's something about us that works really well together. Like, I don't know, anything that is interesting or funny about our charts and the dynamic.
Definitely. I have to say, though, I'm going to expand it out a little bit and say it just seems to be Missoula people, and then I'll bring it back to the two of you. But Missoula people, there is this huge concentration of Taurian moon energy. I have come across so many Taurus moons in Missoula. It's weird. It's really weird. And as a Taurus moon myself, I find that just hilarious and fun. I get it, but the two of you have very close moons. And, Bernice, I think I remember, Kaylee, I do remember saying this to you. I don't know if you'll remember, but I'm pretty sure I said this to you, that you're willing to sweat for your spirituality.
You said that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense to me because of I don't want to, be too personal and give away too much of your chart, but like there are things about you that when mixed with that moon, that grounded moon, you're just going to make it practical. That's just what you're going to do. And that's what a Taurian moon likes is, feeling like things are, not hard, very easy, very comfortable, very nurturing, very nourishing, very, so that's what your moon tells you about yourself is your kind of your wattage, like the rate of flow. That's how I think of it is your rate of flow. Like, are you a 40 watt bulb or are you a 75 watt bulb or are you a Klieg light? It's kind of like, so you and Bernice, so Bernice is also a Taurus moon, but Bernice's moon is configured so that she grounds things and keeps them practical with a sense of humor. So, you're both offbeat and you play off one another. And that I think is why you work well together. I'm assuming you work well together, but I would see that in a synastry chart as two people who emotionally are in sync. You guys, your rates of flow are very similar, and where maybe Kaylee's going to go out and dance, and obviously you dance too, Bernice, but where Kaylee's going to be dancing and sweating out her stuff, Bernice is going to be cracking jokes, or she's going to be, but either way, it's not going to be boring, and it's not going to be grounded in the details so much as it's just going to be grounded in a way that, like there's no sense in doing it if it doesn't bring me further toward the goal. Let's just get down to business here. But we're going to do it in a way that everybody feels like they can stand it, because sometimes we have to do stuff we don't want to do, and a Taurian moon can be kind of stubborn. That's another thing. I think you both understand the stubborn streaks that you both have.
It's true. It's so true.
Yeah, that's very true.
Oh, I love it though. This is just so cool to talk with you, Whitney. And we'll be sure to share all of your information in the notes of this podcast too, so that people can find you. But I would just say, like, hands down, anybody out there listening who's even slightly curious,
yes,
you just go for it.
Yeah, just go for it. Whitney has a great way of being welcoming, practical, informative. It's never like a surprise, like, what? you're growing a thorn on your head.
Well, like I would hope that I'm also a mom and I've taught high school. I mean, like you do have to understand how to present information in a way that people know what to do with it. I guess that's also that practical side of being a Taurian moon, where you're not going to throw somebody at throw something at them and be like, hey, have fun with that hand grenade and see you, bye.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally accessible. I guess that's another great word for what you do.
Yeah. I'm just so thankful for all of the ways that you have not only helped me, but the people that I love and hopefully this community as well. And thanks for your time. And when you think about, I love that you told your story to us in detail, because for me, I could just to see how much goes into the acquiring of the knowledge and the skills and the life and the depth to then be able to do the job that people, when you find people and you're like, that is what they are meant to be doing. Mm-hmm. And then if you can track back all the different instances and things that have happened in their life to get them to that point, it's just really, really fascinating and cool to me. So thank you also for all of the years and years and years of your life that went into getting you to the place you are now, because we all get a benefit. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Whitney. This was really great.
I have enjoyed this so much. And I have very high regard for you and for what you're doing and just that you've brought me into your community and made me a part of it, really, because I have been. I know a lot of your friends and a lot of your coworkers now. It means so much to me. So thank you. And thank you, everybody in Missoula and elsewhere who's part of the ULA community. It's a pleasure to serve you.
Oh,
yay.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, we will talk to you again soon. I'm sure I already have many more questions for you. I'm just happy to sign up. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ulaverse.
Bye-bye.
Bye.